People like rankings. That's a fact of life in the YouTube reviewer space, and before us, it was a fact of life for listicle BuzzFeed articles. Doesn't matter how obscure, it isn't important whether it makes any sense or not. You put your thoughts on a series of products or ideas into a linear format, and the average consumer will eat it up, no questions asked. Why else do you think some of the most well-known, popular videos in this community are ranking? They never fail to attract an audience, and personally I think the reason for that is because we naturally have a fascination towards hearing others' opinions, especially if they're different from ours. And that's why, on the off chance that I make a rankings video, it's either on an obscure topic or one I know is gonna have a couple contrarian takes in there. It makes for the most clickable, interesting content, and while I won't be doing that today, I will be giving you my top pick. It's basically like a rankings video, but I skip right to the engaging part and cut out everything else. That or it's just a review, but hey, I've talked about the concept of rankings long enough to put it in the text, so gotcha bitch, you can't complain about it now. But what is it I'm leading up to saying is the best anyway? I suppose as an animation reviewer, the obvious choice would be the best show from a certain network or filmed by a certain studio, but by now you guys should know I don't like to make standard choices. I want to get a bit more specific. Sequels, and not just any sequels, Pixar sequels. The studio known for creating usually unnecessary, but occasionally worthwhile continuations to their beloved properties. I guess technically sequel wouldn't be the best word, considering that's less used as an umbrella term, which is how I'm using it, and more to describe a specific variant of film. And as far as that sliver of Pixar goes, it's kinda slim pickings for what's the best. What do we got? Finding Dory? Cars 2 and 3? Planes? God help anyone that says Planes is their favorite Pixar sequel. It wasn't even made by them. No, really, there's around 3 acceptable common answers people go for if you ask them. Incredibles 2, Toy Story 3, or the most prominently picked of them all, Toy Story 2. I know saying Toy Story 3 first was a bit confusing, but I wanted to keep a narrative flow, so shut up. And I understand why people always go to Toy Story 2. It's an improvement over the first in almost every way. Expands the lore, explores the characters, better looking, sharper writing. But I want to offer an alternative I don't hear come up too often in discussion, and that's the prequel to Monsters, Inc., Monsters University. Yeah, oftentimes when I bring up old MU as my favorite Pixar sequel, the most common responses I've gotten are A, alright, I forgot that one existed. B, really, it wasn't even that good. Or C, Braxton, it's 3 AM, what the fuck are you doing in my house? And hearing those kind of reactions reminds me how under-discussed MU is as a part of Pixar's lineup. Not that I don't understand why. MU was intentionally created to, from the offset, look like a typical characters you love but in college approach to a prequel. And while that premise alone is already enough to get me interested, seeing as college is so rarely used as a setting in animation as is, under the surface it's anything but. A couple videos ago, I told you why Paranorman was a subversive masterpiece on the concept of the typical zombie horror film. So now, I'm gonna show you why Monsters University flips the script on your average, dorky college kid coming of age film. And I can do it all without going too in depth on the original film, as it isn't all that necessary. All you need to know beforehand is that the world of Monsters Inc. is built on the premise that monsters live in a society mirroring our own in pretty much every way, except for one thing. They get the energy for all their power from screaming, so professionals in the field work at factories where they enter human kids' bedrooms and scare them. Our protagonists for Monsters Inc., as well as MU, are James Sullivan and Mike Wazowski, a pair of best friends that work together to keep their top spot on the scare leaderboard and have possibly the greatest chemistry of any duo in a Pixar film. However, when you look at the big picture, Monsters Inc. was really more so Sully's movie. He was the central focus, the conflict of the film is predicated on his actions, etc. So while Mike is definitely a prominent part of the first film, he's not the star. And that's what Monsters University wants to do for his character, putting him at the forefront. Again, drawing comparisons to Paranorman, MU starts perfectly by establishing a basis for which to be subverted while drawing the audience in with a seemingly typical beginning. Mike is a smart but socially awkward kid that's often ignored because of his size and lack of scariness, but he finds new motivation to show what he's truly worth when he sees a scarer in action, inspiring Mike to aspire for the career path and work hard to get accepted at Monsters University, the same college his inspirational figure went to and recommended he should too to be a scarer. However, even as a young adult, Mike isn't taken seriously by pretty much anyone, and on the first day of school he's upstaged by Sully, who's portrayed at first as a typical jock with a successful parent. Arrogant, full of natural talent, and most likely didn't have to work too hard for his position. This is all set up to give us the impression that Mike is an underdog, and in a way, he is. No one has any expectations for him and believes that based on his appearance, he isn't able to be scary. And as basically all underdog stories before have gone, the film is about us discovering that isn't the case. At least for now. Sully and Mike's personalities are also reminiscent of a typical dynamic, the jock and nerd separated by social classes that come to an understanding when the film demands. And for this duo, it's when they spend the whole semester competing but are told neither can continue in the scaring major, Sully for being lazy and not trying, Mike for plain not being scary, and the only way for them to get back in is to enter a scaring competition for sororities and prove they deserve to stay, picking up an entire group of underdog outcasts to go along with them. By now you should be catching on to how the archetypes and average story beats are piling on as the film really starts chugging. intriguing. Underdog wants to be overdog, so he works hard but is still undermined by the apparent overachiever. They duke it out, and after those antics end up hurting them both, they get together, sort out their issues, train up the impossible team, face adversity along the way, as is required. But in the end, when the chips are down and our main man Mike needs to deliver the best scare performance of the century, he musters up his courage, uses the same techniques of his idol, thinks about all the doubters, and he wins it big! He proved them all wrong, and Mike and Sully go on to be great scares. But we're only 2/3 of the way through here. What's left to happen? As a last little goodbye, seemingly inconsequential in the plot, as the crew's leaving and Mike proudly looks over the robot child he scared with all his might, he does a playful roar, and the screamometer goes all the way. Then he pauses, snaps his fingers, and it goes all the way again. Suddenly it hits you. Mike didn't actually scare it. He thought he did, but that's thanks to Sully cheating on the machine, so Mike's settings were so low, it'd be impossible for him not to win. And that draws us back to the original assertions made about Mike at the beginning of the film. He isn't scary. It's the phrase he keeps having beaten into him over the runtime of the film, over the course of his life, that he internalizes and the audience is supposed to believe we should discard, knowing he'll overcome the odds in the end. It doesn't matter what the kids say, what his teacher says, what the students say, or even what the dean says. Mike Wazowski can be scary, and he has so much confidence in that idea no matter what, it doesn't hit him that he isn't scary for a long time. It's not exactly self-denial, he genuinely thinks his book smarts and effort have made him a true scarer, but aside from everyone around him, his results show he isn't. But the moment doesn't truly hit Mike until he goes out and uses a door, breaks into the human world, and can't so much as get a mild yelp. In a way, the film's trying to trick you again, this time into thinking Mike didn't pass because of his idiot friend that didn't believe in him, and his real moment of triumph comes now. But it doesn't. He fails. And so you're forced to wonder, what's so uplifting about that? The main character doesn't fulfill his dream and the doubters were all right? Not exactly. You see, one bit about the dynamic between Sully and Mike I didn't take the time to mention previously was how they have differing but incredibly relevant skills that, when put together, helped move each other and the frat Uzma Kappa forward. Mike is smart, perceptive, and always has a plan to dig into from his infinite knowledge, while Sully carries resourcefulness in the moment and makes for a great improviser. Both are needed to get the job done. Sully is just more suited to specifically the role of a scarer. It's not like he could have done it on his own. Mike's the key to his success, and that shows he has great talent, but he's not scary. And with that comes a message that could be hard for kids to swallow, but that's what makes it all the more important they understand. Kids, you're not always gonna reach your dreams. It's not fair, believe me, it isn't. But eventually, there's only so far certain people can go. Peter Dinklage doesn't have the capacity to be a Harlem Globetrotter. Gandhi wouldn't do well as a linebacker for the 49ers. Can they read all the books about sports, study the techniques, learn the skills? Yes. But that's not going to change what they physically aren't capable of. Some dreams are completely out of reach and can only be attained via a particular set of skills that can't be taught or earned. It's possible to refine what you have, but a modified squirt gun isn't going to fare too well against an unpolished Desert Eagle 50 caliber handgun. It doesn't mean you're worthless though. You have skills, same as anyone else. It might not be the set of skills you were looking to be known for, but if you have a passion for doing it, why not? I know it sounds like settling for sloppy seconds, but that's not it. It's about knowing your limits and making the best of your situation. After all, you're not the only one dealing with shit that's difficult to overcome, and Monsters University displays that idea in the aftermath of Mike's attempted scare at a summer camp, having him sit by a lake to ponder whether his life has been a lie or not when Sully finds him. By this point, Mike's confidence, his worldview, and everything he believes he stands for has been fundamentally shattered, and after all the times he's been beaten down and told he's worthless, this is the moment where he starts to think they were alright. And Sully attempting to console Mike by saying he knows what it feels like is just him mindlessly condescending when he doesn't know shit. How could he understand Mike's pain when he's always gotten the credit for Mike's work, whether he intended it or not, when he was the star pupil from day one and had the admiration of everyone? It's the type of raw emotional response that's way more realistic than Sully saying, I know what it feels like, and Mike immediately listening. They're not children, they're young adults. So they're naturally skeptical, cynical, and in the case of Mike, he spent so much time focusing on his own issues, appearance, and self-worth, he hasn't taken into account the problems Sully has had over the semester, even though the audience, if perceptive, can see it just as plainly. Sully struggles in school as time passes because he doesn't build up his skill set and doesn't quite understand how or why he should. He's unaware and competitive, and most importantly, he's scared of letting people down, so he's willing to go to any extent to win, including cheating and lying. He's frightened by the prospect of not living up to his potential, same as Mike, only his aren't self-imposed. They're based on how others perceive him. And while Sully might be naturally scary, he didn't know how to live up to that reputation until Mike showed him the way, same as Mike didn't find his true calling until he worked with Sully and the Uzmas. They're actually far more alike than you might presume, and my favorite part of it all is that their struggles that led them to the lake scene are by no fault of their own, but as a result of the school system that molded them. During all those moments where Mike's told he isn't scary, it's never just, "You're not scary," and left at that. It's always followed by another statement. "You're not scary, and you don't belong. You're not scary, and that means you're worthless. You're not scary, so how can you call yourself a monster?" It's an intentional addition to comment on how schools at every level will place greater attention and value on people that can perform particular tasks better than others. Wait, you aren't getting straight A's in calculus? What are you, stupid? Everyone else knows how to do it, so why can't you? You keep failing my class over and over again. It must be because you have no talent and aren't trying hard enough. These are the mentalities that created Mike's character. So often we're told as a society that individuals will succeed in life if they work hard enough, since we live in a meritocracy. And if they're poor or downtrodden, it's from a lack of trying, a laziness, the inability for these douchebag hippies to stop smoking the devil's lettuce so they can get a job. And so Mike's propelled towards working harder than anyone under the pretext that if he wants it harder than anyone, he can become a scarer. But he has to follow the rules, do as he's told, stay in the lines. He's got to have a one-track mind focused so heavily on becoming a scarer nothing else matters. But all that does is create tunnel vision. He sinks into the same mindset of everyone around him, believing if you aren't a scarer, you're a nobody, and he worked the hardest, so he should be the big man on campus from day one. But all that admiration goes to Sully, a monster representing everything Mike isn't. He doesn't try, he doesn't have a wide range of talents, but he looks exactly how the most accomplished scarers do, and his dad's a well-known professional, so he gets the fame without lifting a finger. Why? Because he was lucky. And that's a factor no one brings up since it doesn't sound as uplifting or nice, but it's true. There will always be someone stronger than you, smarter than you, richer than you, and they'll get farther for reasons completely out of your control. But that doesn't mean you have to let their success control you. Mike made that mistake based on what the environment around him said was important, so he viewed himself in comparison to Sully when he should have been playing a whole nother game. And Sully knows that's the case too, seeing as before Mike gave him the push he needed to triumph, his unearned fame gave him a heap of responsibilities and expectations that Mike never had. The college professors and students treated him like the best there ever was before he could prove he was worthy of it. So once that adoration got to his head, when he started falling behind the top of the class, all that unwarranted adoration turned to crushing pressure. And without a mentor to nurture his best qualities, he had no idea how to get back on that pedestal. The longer he spent at the bottom, the more Sully yearned to be back at the top. Of course he tampered with the scare machine. He needed to do whatever it took to get back on the throne, and he knew that while Mike was an amazing coach, he wasn't a good scarer. It wasn't from a lack of believing in Mike having skills, it was about him trying to play within the standards of a broken game. I know it sounds off topic, but to provide a quick analogy here, let's look at My Hero Academia. In that world, characters are born into having superpowers, and to prove they're good enough to go to hero school, they have to pass an entrance exam where they destroy robots and act heroically to earn points. But then there's Shinzo. He doesn't look like a hero, doesn't have the personality of a hero, and his ability is useless for fighting robots. However, it's a great ability. When he asks someone a question, if they answer, he controls their mind. Strategically speaking, it's got so many practical advantages compared to a basic strength for speed power, but it needs the encouragement and support of others for him to show it off, which at first he doesn't get. The entrance exam judges students on a narrow physical basis, so he's seen as subpar and doesn't make it far. But once he can use it in a practical setting, people understand that he has what it takes to work in the hero biz. It may not be in a traditional fashion, but regardless, he's way more important than he was originally given credit for. That's Mike in relation to the scare games. They judged monsters through traditional methods of usefulness in the scaring industry, so he fell behind his teammates and got viewed as the weak link, but it's his strategies that pushed the team forward. And once the duo gets stuck in the human world when Sully has to scare a group of adults to power the doorway home, Mike shows how much of a tour de force he is when given the chance. He doesn't do the scaring himself, but without him, it never could have worked. And though he still doesn't get that after they're expelled and almost split up, Sully does. He knows Mike's worth better than anyone at MU ever will. And so with the traditional route cut off, they work their way up from the bottom as a collaborative duo and get to where we see them at the start of Monsters Inc., subverting another commonly held societal belief that college is the only option and if you fail there, it's game over. That's an important message that, personally speaking, really stuck with me and affected my trajectory in life. Because for a little trivia about me, I finished high school in 3 years, but chose not to go to college right away so I could focus on all of this. And not gonna lie, it's been working out really well so far. Usually for kids, college is that sort of thing you're meant to do and not question, but there are so many other options: apprenticeships, trade school, tutoring, or in my case, not going at all when there's a better option. It's not the end all be all. And including that last little twist at the end helps me to stay firm in my opinion that Monsters University is truly the best Pixar continuation / sequel. There are few Pixar films, let alone sequels, that capture the complex emotions and situations that MU does. And while I do heavily enjoy Toy Story 2 and so on, they don't have as deep a message or as imaginative a way of subverting expectations. It reinvented and gave new dimensions to characters I already knew and loved, provided an interesting setting and perspective that isn't seen in animation too often, made me think as a kid, and it makes me think deeper still as an adult. Plus, it's such a perfect origin story for the characters that flows so well into Monsters Inc. You could watch MU first and get a more chronologically consistent viewing overall, which I usually end up doing. It's great as a prequel, great as a film on its own, and one of the realest Pixar films I can think of. so why not watch it if you haven't? I've been Just Stop, and you've all been in comas for 5 years. It's time to wake up, please. Peace out.